Let's look at this,
Oh,
the Marvel dialogue thing. I'm kind of interested in this person's take. I've never watched this person's reel, by the way, so I don't know who they are.
you're different.
You're a cube. Talking.
Do you like this writing style? For years, critics and audiences have been in complete agreement that it isn't desirable. What's fascinating about this issue, however, is that the people responsible for it don't seem to like it either. At least with other controversial storytelling decisions, the creator usually has some kind of visible intent.
I would like it though if the critics who don't like it because they think it's too long, at least give me the credit for like not making a mistake. I meant to do that.
But when pressed about this sanitized, quippy, almost childish style of writing, the director of God of War, Lao Fei, doesn't really have an explanation.
Because I think obviously people are always worried about, like kind of quippy writing and...
I think that there's not a ton of dialogue in the game reveal for how long it is. So I don't know if they've seen like a full picture. We always want to have a range of presentation for somebody's character.
So if nobody wants this, why does it keep coming back?
Wait, that's not... That clip didn't say they didn't want it, right? The clip was saying, like, you guys are making a preemptive judgment.
Well, I have a theory. Two, actually. Let's start with the second one. In sports, there's a saying that every team is composed of two kinds of people, those carrying the piano and those playing it. The piano carriers are the defenders, the people doing the work that require discipline and conscientiousness. The piano players are the more creatively oriented people in the attack, the ones expected to do something surprising once the structure has been built around them. For a major creative endeavor like making a video game, there are many piano carriers for every piano player. For every role dedicated to pure creativity, there are a dozen producers, assistants, coordinators, and managers. As much as we wish this were a purely creative medium, most of the work has very little to do with creativity itself.
Okay, I feel like that's completely a bad take right there. I think it's kind of... It to me, it seems like if you're talking about writing styles... Oh, wait. It's funny because the reason the writing is like that, because Levi had like to start writing, that's literally it. I was gonna say, oh yeah, Del, you're here. You can give more insight to this. But like to me, even besides that fact, this is how people talk. You know what I mean? I think what gets missed in all of this is that this is how you guys talk. This is how people talk. I think people would look at older videos, older movies, and be like, things were different. Like, you weren't of that time, right? Like, you can be overly quippy, but like, there's always been like punchy, quippy dialogue in films and media. You just look at them and they go like, yeah, Shane, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh, that guy's just talking like transatlantic accent, old stuff. It's like, no, that was punchy. That was quippy for back then. This was punchy dialogue. If you watch an old film, they also talk a mile a minute. Like, they talk a lot. I think the issue here, though, is it's just popular to say that it's just Marvel writing. And it's like, oh, it's quips, it's this. But people make jokes. And I'm sorry. People act as if Marvel is the only style there is. Marvel did not invent this style, okay? But that is how people talk. Because then what do they want? Like, do they want like Shakespearean English? Do they want it to be written like a play? Do they want like to be dramatic? Like, do you not have moments where you're quipping with people? Like, I don't understand. They act as if the entire games are just quip, 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 and not like periods. I was literally playing Ragnarok. I've been replaying Ragnarok, and I'm like, yeah, they have some jokes here and there, but it's largely silent. Like, there's not that much actual spoken dialogue between characters in Ragnarok.
Because games are as complex as they are, the teams that tend to do well often do so not by being the most creative, but by being the most organized. Look at Insomniac, for instance. They are perhaps the best in the business at thinking inside the box, and doing so in a timely and effective manner. The people who lead these teams are far from the most creative you've seen, but they are the most disciplined. Eric Williams, the director of the critically and commercially acclaimed God of War Ragnarok, doesn't actually have the capacity to imagine something in his mind, but he absolutely absolutely has the capacity to plot every single minute of his 25-hour blockbuster onto an Excel spreadsheet, and that's why he gets the top job. Now, with that,
I think it's fine to like writing style, but the reason it's like that isn't a weird conspiracy. It's just that the writing too is not the same as Ragnarok. I feel like people though are too focused on like the writing style they don't like, but they never give counterpoints of how they want it to be done, right? Like do you want, let's say, God of War Lafe? Do you want to be written like the old God of War games, like the Jaffe directed? Well, this is the first one, the Jaffe involved games where there's barely any dialogue, and whenever Kratos speaks, it's just to threaten to kill somebody. Because like they never give me, and I'm sorry, you can't use Spider-Man as part of the quippy dialogue. That's Spider-Man, baby. That's what he does. Comic books are full of quips. That's just comic books. Always has been. Even Batman gets in on this.
in mind, let me ask you this. Do you think the writers of these games are playing the piano or carrying it? In a GDC talk from 2023, Ubisoft writers Helly Kennedy and Brendan Hennessy
A white guy named Brendan Hennessy is crazy.
spend 62 minutes discussing their approach to writing AAA action-adventure games. They go over all of the different problems they have to solve in order to create a narrative that fits into the larger structure of a game. They have dozens of slides, infographics, flowcharts, and spreadsheets pertaining to the carrying of the piano, but they don't really have anything at all about actually playing it. It was about halfway through this talk that I realized these people are not piano players. People who are truly creative to their core do not think this way. They tend to hate having a long list of rules to follow or being forced into predefined frameworks. As a result, they are not especially
That's an overgeneralization if I've ever heard one.
compatible with structures like these. Instead, the people who tend to excel as video game writers are those who are best at following the rules. They understand what needs to be done to make the narrative component of the game fit in with everything else. And I hate to say it, but it is very rare that creative people are truly orderly, or that orderly people are truly creative. You might think that the writers at Santa Monica or Insomniac are cut from a different cloth, but just look them up on IMDb. These are all part of a larger, unified cluster of writers who have almost exclusively been writing for games, and who have collectively established a philosophy around how to do it. These guys are experts at following the rules, and amateurs when it comes to breaking them.
But why would you want them? Okay, this is really bad to me. This is really bad to me because let's say you were a book writer, you write fantasy novels, you're really good at writing fantasy. So you have a system. So you have Brandon Sanderson actually does this too. You have a system, right? You have rules you follow, internal logic you have to follow. If you guys were here earlier, I showed you my stories. I showed you how I come up with my backstories and my world building on stuff too. There are set rules I follow. Okay, this person does this, so they can do this, they can do this, right? If their whole thing is I write books, I'm a fantasy writer, they're going to have a formula and a way they write because that's how they do their thing. That's why they do the thing. Same thing for game writer. I know how to write for video games, but you're saying I need to break the rule, but break what rule? Like the rule of game writing? So should it now not make, should we not marry the narrative to the game now? Should we have a divorce? Should we do a Deus Ex Human Revolution where we have different teams working on different parts of the game and then just like stitch it together? Here's the narrative, but here's the combat. But here's a boss room that you have to use guns. Oh, you didn't use guns in your other part of the game? Whoopsies.
So what are the rules then? Well, it's
Please
easy
tell
to
me.
get caught up in the quips themselves, but even if you removed all of the self-awareness, there would still be an awkwardness inherent to how these characters are written. I would argue that this writing style is equally defined by how archetypically it treats characters, always prioritizing easily legible traits over any sort of nuance. It's also not too biting or risky, but rather sanitized to be broadly understandable to all. These three characteristics are distinct, but together they point toward one specific.
This makes no sense to me. This makes overt awareness of self and audience, trait-driven characterizations. Spell that wrong. I hope you explain these actually.
Specific concept, readability. This push toward readability is evident in the Washington Post interview with Insomniac's creative director Marcus Smith, where he described Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart as a more personal story with an endearing and relatable cast, even for new players. This is an important shift from the biting, situation-bound comedy of the earlier games to softer, more empathetic, broad family entertainment. The goal is for the writing to be not just universally appealing, but also unlikely to feel dated 5 years after release. It's quite fitting that this article is almost exactly 5 years old as I'm writing this, and he is indeed right about Rift Apart not feeling dated. Instead, it feels almost aggressively undated, scrubbed of any specific cultural textures that might anchor it to a particular moment. So the rules are all about readability, accessibility.
Wait, so you're complaining now that they're making content that's more timeless instead of being anchored to one specific... I mean, there are still games out there that don't give a shit about this. And like he's talking about people being sanitized and whatever. Like, I know this is everyone's go-to game, but like, I don't think people are sanitized in The Last of Us. Hell, even really God of War. Like, I think also he's talking about archetypes. Every type of writing has archetypes. Because again, there's nothing new under the sun.
And universality. The characters you write need to be understandable to all parts of the team, readable across all cultures, at all periods of time, by everyone. That's what causes the feeling that HR is watching over the writer's room at all times. In my video about Ubisoft, I recommended that these studios should allocate some real capital toward hiring writers from the world of prestige TV. But I think there's a reason why that wouldn't really work.
Because TV writing is completely different than game writing. TV is a passive experience. TV writing has to also factor in other things like shit, like commercial breaks, like the actor running it, the actor doing the lines. And TVs also have a bunch of different writers. I mean, so do games too, but like TVs have writers' rooms where it's not even the same people writing the script. It's multiple people. It operates completely differently than game writing.
Those writers, pioneered by David Chase and his team in the early 2000s with The Sopranos, spent almost every minute of their day actually playing the piano. The decade before had cemented a very rigid, defined way of writing TV, with every episode of every season of every show feeling deeply homogenous. David Chase and HBO dared to step outside all of that, embracing the strengths of the medium without succumbing to its rigidity. And I think, right now, it's clear that the studios making the biggest narrative-focused games are exactly where TV was right before The Sopranos. But there's something missing from this argument. What we've established here is that writing for AAA games is all about making a story that is as readable and digestible as possible. That explains why a lot of the dialogue feels so safe and corporate, but it doesn't explain this. If the system and the culture were entirely built around everyone staying in line, the result would not be something as strange as this talking cube. Something still motivates these writers.
Okay, again, the talking cube, this is a fantasy game. But like, would you say the same thing about like a Silent Hill? Like, if we're just focused on like narrative games, okay, again, The Last of Us 2, that's a narrative game, that counts, right? Like, and also another thing too, a lot of the quips happen when your character isn't like engaging with other people, but just out in the world, right? Because it'd be fucking boring if you're just running around with nothing happening, saying nothing. I know he would say, oh, but Breath of the Wild, Breath of the Wild. I have my complaints with Breath of the Wild, okay? I still think it's weird that Link's a side protagonist, but it's also a different genre. When it comes to narrative different things though too, like, I just think it's so weird that, the approach now is just, let's complain about it, and maybe he talks about it in more detail. Let's complain about it, but then let's not actually like offer a tangible solution. This falls out once you get to Death Stranding because that basically exactly right. Like, to me, this seems like he's playing a very specific kind of. This is like someone who, ironically, just watches Marvel movies and goes, "Man, movies are really predictable nowadays. They're all the same. It's a character meets another character with similar powers to them, and then they have a big fight in the third act." It's like, well, yeah, you've been watching the Avengers franchise. Watch another movie.
writers to sprinkle in weirdness and quirkiness in ways that the rigidity of the process would not necessarily suggest? I think the answer to that lies right here. In this video by Alana Pierce, it becomes clear that there's something else that is equally threatening to the creative process as its rigidity.
You cannot be afraid to cut, and thus must be cut. Cut early. If you doubt something, cut before you've spent time on it. Characters get cut. The whole process is death by 1,000 cuts. Lines get cut, things are cut and sliced and diced. Things must thus be cut.
Alright, so how do you make sure your work doesn't get cut then? Well, you make sure your contributions don't feel inessential. You make sure they don't feel too undefined. If you're writing a new character, you protect its existence by adding more contour. You've probably heard of the phrase that what gets measured gets managed.
This is applicable to everything, though. Lines and dialogue gets cut off of books. It's mostly due to budget and time constraints, or if it's just not working.
In other words, the more we define what we have in front of us, the more likely we are to pay attention to it. If you translate that to character writing, the clearer you can communicate your vision for a character, the more essential that character is going to feel. So if you come up with a character who can't be distilled into their most essential traits, turns of phrase, and behaviors, they're probably not going to make it.
Atsu doesn't care if she lives or dies, so long as she can punish the Yote Six, a ruthless gang who
I'm sorry, but that's just basic, though. If you can't define the character you want to make, what do we do? You want me to waste time? You want me to waste time with this amorphous idea you have? What?
her family.
The only problem with this philosophy is this. If you step back and look at the richest characters in long-form storytelling, they all go against these principles. Take Jeremy Strong's character in Succession, for example. I've asked many different people who this character is, and the reply is never the same. He's obnoxious, he's tragic, he's heroic, he's comedic, he's pathetic. You could write 20 dissertations on this character and still not pin down exactly what he captures.
Your proof cannot be you asked people and they had a different interpretation of a character. You are using God of War a lot here, right? I could say, what are your thoughts about Kratos? Someone could say he's gruff, he's aggressive, he's violent. Someone could say he's tortured. Some would say he's overprotective. Some would say he's not protective enough. Some people might say he's too guarded. Some people would say he's not guarded enough, right? That doesn't necessarily make it a true thing. And also, every character at their core has things that make them that character. And then you have layers on top of it. If he is angry, well, why is he angry? There's reasons why he's angry. I very much doubt if this character could be everything to everyone, then this character is not defined. Like people, if I asked you to describe your spouse to me, you should be able to describe them to me. And I'd be like, I don't know, they're happy, they're sad, they're funny, they're a bore, they're exciting, they're boring. Like they can't be everything. There has to be something core to them. And then you build on that. It can't just be I'm everything to everybody.
All you know is that he does capture something profound.
That's bullshit though. That's nebulous. Hey, what's this? Imagine playing a video game and they're just like, hey, what's this button do? I have a green controller. It's like, what's this button do? And it's like, this brings up the start menu, huh? What's this button do? Oh, this is heavy attack. This is light attack. What about the B button? It's like, it just feels like it does something, you know? So the B button is doing anything? No, it's just like, it can do stuff. But what does it do? Well, it's hard to, like, you can't have that. And it's like, I want you guys to think about it. What characters have you seen in movie or video games that are just like, unless they're an eldritch entity beyond comprehension, you can't boil them down to a few key things. Like, that doesn't exist. That's bad advice.
If you were to write a character this way for something like God of War,
this is especially evident in Ragnarok, where the new characters Thrud, Thor, and Heimdall, etc., appear significantly more archetypal compared to Kratos. Yeah, but that's because, again, you have had at this point 5 games with Kratos. So you understand his character and his character arc. Everyone starts as a cutout. It's just for identifying a character. That's literally across every medium. It's every medium. You have terms for this shit, for crying out loud. Like in the 3-man group, you have the leader, you have the lancer, you have the brains, right? 4-man group, you have the bronze. 5-man group, you have like the mastermind, who's not necessarily always like there's like that too. So you have to have immediate information spread across, right? And you don't have infinite time. This is a TV show.
It would absolutely get cut, but the more contour and definition you add to a character, the less room there is for the actor, and eventually the audience, to fill in the blanks. And as we all know, it is in those gaps that the real magic of these characters comes alive.
You're allowed to feel just a little bit of excitement over this.
Well, I'll get excited when we get Alcazar's noose off your neck. Come on.
Okay.
What?
So the problem is not just that the essence of these undefined
is he using these B-roll footage to highlight his point or to say this is what it should be? Because you can't talk about quippy dialogue and then be mad about that and then have fucking Uncharted on screen.
three-dimensional characters is difficult to communicate across departments. It is also that their lack of concrete detail makes them feel less valuable in the eyes of the people making every cut. I'm not going to judge the Cosmic Cube before the game is released, but what I am saying is that this type of quirkiness is much more defined and tangible than the weirdness of Kendall Roy. For all intents and purposes, the cube might as well be wearing a sign that says, "Look how weird I am. Isn't this interesting?" It almost feels designed to make a strong impression from the get-go, just to grab your attention.
Am I going insane? Am I going insane? Am I losing my goddamn mind? It almost feels as if it was designed to grab your attention. Yeah. That's character design. That is, yes, they are designed to specifically grab your attention. That is the entire point, which is why it has grabbed your attention. They were designed to grab your attention. You have character designers. Their whole job is to draw characters that may appeal in a variety of ways, but they're to grab your attention. The more important a character is, the more they grab your attention. That's why when you have background characters, they look plain, but main character, it's the anime. It's the guy with spiky green hair, main character. Girl with purple hair, main character. Those 800 people with black hair and regular glasses, NPCs. This is a visual medium. This is a visual, even in TV shows, main characters stand out visually. Their wardrobe's more extravagant. They have more iconic look. But like, this is like, I don't think he understands this is a different medium. Yes, you have to. This is an insane part. I'm sorry.
Impression from I am. Isn't this interesting? It almost feels designed to make a strong impression from the get-go, just to grab your attention. I'm not saying it's inherently a bad idea, but it does feel like these types of ideas are often given undue chances to survive the guillotine compared to subtler ideas. This is just a theory.
Like what though? Subtler ideas? This is a fucking game trailer. You cannot do subtlety in a game trailer unless you're doing like horror, and even then there's usually a jump scare or something like that. This is specifically supposed to get your attention. What are we doing? I defy you to find a video game, an action-oriented video game trailer that does not show you action. That would be called false advertising, okay? If they only showed you the most subtle, boring parts, and then you play the game, and it's like, what the fuck? This is Devil May Cry? All I saw was V walking around reading poetry. I thought this was a poetry simulator. I thought you were going store to store, buying up eye makeup, using mascara, and going to Hot Topic. Because all they show was this skinny little emo twink walking around his poetry book with his cool ravens. What do you mean this is Devil May Cry? Like, what the fuck is happening?
Of course, but when you attempt to create a character that sticks out, like a talking object, while also abiding by the principles of readability, you unintentionally end up with a deadly combo of corny, quippy, and overcooked lines of dialogue.
You sure? He's got big teeth. So do I.
So
This
when
is
you
Spider-Man.
actually ask the writers how things ended up this way, you never get a good answer, because if we're being honest, this type of writing is never the plan. It's just a very unfortunate product of a system that wants the appearance of creativity without accepting the risk that comes with it. Perhaps it is true, after all, that when the ambition is to make something that everybody tolerates, you end up with something that doesn't really appeal to anyone.
This was such a waste of fucking 11 minutes of my life. And I'm saying this after watching those AI videos. This said nothing. You said nothing. This game, the same game he's talking about
the
here.
exact moment I fell out of love with God of War. It was right here, about halfway into Ragnarok, when you're first introduced to one of the game's most notable new characters. Listen closely to the dialogue here.
Whoa! Loki, right? Gotta say, the irony of this isn't lost on me. This was his room, you know?
His?
My brother's.
Your brother?
For comparison, look at how God of War 2018 introduces a new character.
What do you want?
Oh, you already know the answer to that.
While both these scenes are written by the same people, it's clear that something changed between 2018 and Ragnarok.
Yeah, it's a fucking different character. That's what changed. It's a different character. It's a different character.
Something more fundamental, almost like it was written for a wildly different, less intelligent audience. Where 2018 is written like a game made for adults, specifically parents, Ragnarok is, well, Ragnarok is a lot more complicated than that. Half the game, like the violence and the questions about death, fate, and parenthood, is clearly oriented towards adults. But then there's this other half, where every new character feels so blatantly declarative about what they think, feel, and care about.
There's still a part of me that is so angry.
That they seem like they were dropped in from another universe, one that's probably owned by Disney. The more you play Ragnarok, the more confused you get about who this game is for, and who thought that this drastic tonal change was a good idea. So, what happened? Why did God of War go from this,
then you must be better than me. Understand?
to this?
I knew this was going too smoothly. Little help?
It's worth admitting.
That also happened in the God of War. That also, shit like that happened in 2018 too. What are you talking about? That's Mimir.
Admitting up front that God of War 2018 is not some minimalistic art film disguised as a blockbuster. It can be heavy-handed, it repeats themes, and it underlines points, but it also does something that matters far more than that. It withholds information on purpose, and it treats confusion as a tool rather than a mistake. The Baldur introduction is a great example of this. Less than an hour into the game, a stranger shows up at Kratos' door and talks with unnerving confidence. He claims he knows what Kratos is, but most importantly, he refuses to translate himself. The player is not given a quick flashback, a name card, or a neat summary of the mythology that pins everything down. What makes this scene so great is that it is comfortable with the player not knowing who this person is, not knowing what he wants, and not knowing what assumptions he's operating under. If the Greek games are part of the player's history, the mind fills in one set of possibilities. If they aren't, the mind fills in another. Either
I'm
way,
so
the
lost by
scene
this.
works because it creates questions that loom over the entire rest of the game. That same confidence shows up all over 2018. Look at how ambiguously Freya is introduced, how she isn't instantly categorized as ally or a villain. The Aesir are mostly kept off screen during the game, which makes them feel like distant forces rather.
First off, she absolutely is categorized as an ally off rip. Off rip. She's like immediately kind to you.
Than a roster of personalities waiting their turn. The game constantly gives room for interpretation, suspicion, and ambiguity. As a result, the whole game feels larger than life, almost like we as players only get to see a tiny fraction of what this world has to offer. What's so frustrating about Ragnarok is that it does understand all of this. The opening scene is a masterclass, not just in visual storytelling, but also in characterization. Kratos and Atreus barely speak, and when they do, the words are chosen carefully. The silence has weight. The physicality communicates their distance, their caution, and their half-repaired, half-broken bond. It is a strong piece of work, and it establishes a version of Ragnarok that feels ready to carry the emotional seriousness forward. I remember also being thoroughly impressed by the scene where Thor and Odin visit. Again, what makes this scene great is how much isn't said, and is instead communicated through smaller, less obvious gestures.
Then what's your problem?
The opening of the game is the exception, not the rule. Over the next 25 hours, the story becomes increasingly committed to explaining itself. Scenes tend to arrive with their emotional labels attached. Conversations frequently include small status updates, where characters name what they feel, name what they intend, and name what lesson is being learned. The story rarely lets a moment sit long enough for ambiguity to grow. When discomfort appears, the script often tries to resolve it immediately, sometimes within the same exchange. All of the principles displayed in the
Oh my god, please fucking show what you're talking about. Don't just say shit.
Opening are thrown out for a set of characters and scenes that lack any sense of interiority. If the section with Freya and Vanaheim is where the writing really starts to falter, the first section in Asgard is where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Up until then, the game has enough goodwill stored up, and enough craft in its staging, that the problems could be dismissed as temporary. But Asgard reveals the grander architecture of it all. Once the second half of the cast fully enters the story, the writing begins to rely on characters who feel designed to communicate a single specific function. Between Heimdall, Thrud, Skjoldr, and Sif, much of the nuance that defined the 2018 ensemble is replaced by personalities that feel like cardboard cutouts of real people. They arrive already translated, with absolutely zero depth for the audience to interpret. What makes the Thrud introduction feel so odd is that the dialogue plays as if it knows it is being performed. Thrud and Atreus talk like characters delivering lines, not like people negotiating a fragile social situation. The rhythm has that familiar, quippy, Disney-style cadence, the kind that signals awareness of an audience. The fact that Atreus starts talking to himself in the same manner right before this,
Yeah, I'm just in a magical force that shouldn't exist,
does not help either. It frames the character's internal life in a way that feels written for commentary rather than for realism.
You know what's insane about this whole thing too? What's insane about this is what he's not talking about is the fact that Atreus is very different than Kratos. When you're playing as Kratos, there is no internal monologue spoken outside. That's what Mimir is for, because Kratos is very reserved. So to show the contrast between the son and father, right? This is how Atreus is. He's much more talkative, and he's a fucking kid, so he's much more open to his emotions, right? With how he's feeling. This is how he's chatting himself up. You don't have to like it, but it does serve a narrative purpose here. Atreus is not his father, and that's fine. But then to also be like, what about Thor? Did you notice how he's not talking about Thor? because Thor completely defeats what he's talking about. Same thing with Odin. He's looking at the side character. I could say the same shit about Brock and Sindri in the first game. Oh, Brock's the gruff one. Sindri's the little the snivelly one. Where's their character development? Oh, in the next game. Like you also have to understand there are characters who are focused. You're not going to flesh out every fucking character. In the first God of War game, there was like 4 people to flesh out. Like he mentioned, the Aesir were mostly off camera. So it was Kratos, Atreus, Baldur, Freya. That's it. That's it. It's easy when it's only 4 characters. But Ragnarok is dealing with a larger group. So of course you're going to have people who are already established. Also, because these people internally have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. So we don't need to go through this rigmarole again. Heimdall's a pretentious asshole because he can see everyone's intentions. So no one can tell him nothing, all right?
This kind of dialogue has become common in big budget games, and it often gets described as Marvel dialogue. It's a voice where characters are constantly smoothing over tension with self-aware humor, constantly clarifying the mood, and constantly nudging the scene toward watchability. Forspoken is an easy reference point here because it showed how quickly this voice can destroy a world's credibility. Ragnarok is not as extreme, and it has more skill behind it, but the habit is similar. The dialogue regularly breaks the illusion that these are people living inside a mythic crisis. It reminds the audience that this is a constructed narrative, shepherded beat by beat. For me, this is the point where Ragnarok shattered. Not because it lacked themes or because it lacked emotional moments, but because the story kept signaling its own intent. Characters frequently behave like they are aware of the story they are in. At some points,
I wonder if that's a meta commentary on the fact that there are the Norns in this game that quite literally are like, you guys are all characters. The game itself could be a performance. And again, this isn't even true about half the characters he's talking about.
it almost feels fourth wall breaking, like you're waiting for one of the characters to look at the camera and say, "You got that?"
For the sake of our children, we must be better.
The more I played Ragnarok, the more I felt this dissonance between a game that expects me to both be mature and immature at the same time. The questions that always came to mind for me were, 1, how did the game end up like this? And 2, why was no one talking about it? The critical reception often treated Ragnarok like the apex of television-style drama and game.
Okay, I'm bored now. This guy just has the same fucking, like, beating a dead horse, right? Like, I just feel like it's just like, to me, because again, maybe it's just fresher in my mind because I'm actually like, I am actively playing Ragnarok again. Like I just finished the got the Draupnir spear, that part of the game, right? And like the way that the game is split between what Kratos' side does and what Atreus' side does, it's a good contrast to show how these are 2 different characters. The dialogue is different when it's Atreus versus when it's just Kratos. But also, Mimir acts the same way he did in this game and the other game. He just keeps making these blanket statements with no actual footage from the game to let us see what he's talking about. He's just hoping you also agree. Like, if you're going to do this, you're going to show the footage, play the audio, let the audience get a sense of, okay, this is what you're talking about. But if I just say, oh, everyone does this. He took that scene with Freya. But it's like, what is the context of the scene, right? Is she talking to Kratos? You never told someone you were angry at them? Like, you know what? I'm gonna let this shit go because we gotta finish this or whatever. You never say anything like that. And it's also a much more dramatic story. The stakes are higher. It's heightened drama. If you look at it as like a play, which they reference a lot in the game, by the way, in terms of dialogue between Mimir and Kratos, little snippets, the fucking Norns, like the play, like these are players in a play. It's a meta commentary also too. And it's not to say the dialogue's perfect. Nothing fucking is. But the way they harp on this shit, it's like, well, the first game was the fucking same. You cherry picked scenes. You picked scenes where Kratos is talking to Atreus about be better after he kills a god. There's also scenes like that in Ragnarok. He talks about the beginning of the game, but he's the one talk about, Kratos' time with Atreus, how the weight of their prophecy has driven a wedge between them. Right? Which is why Kratos is more closed off, which is like why Atreus is much more explosive with his emotions, because Kratos doesn't tell him shit. So you know what I mean? In fact, his emotions being out of control literally trigger his transformations. And he's a fucking teenager. Like, it's the kids in this, it's the young people in this game that talk more like, this is how I feel, not the adults. Thor doesn't go, I'm sad because Allfather only uses me as a killing instrument and doesn't recognize my humanity. He doesn't say that shit at all. It's done through his actions. The fact that he's always violent, he's drunk, he hates himself, he's self-deprecating. That's not spoken, that's shown. Odin doesn't go, I'm a wily, conniving man. These are my evil plans. He's also full of mysteries upon mysteries. The whole point of the game is to see what the fuck is Odin doing. What is that glowing thing underneath the lodge, right? Even for Atreus, his whole thing is trying to find out who he is and also prevent his fucking dad from dying. And that is causing strife with him and his father. Like, there's a lot happening here. And they want to harp on the dialogue, but look who's saying it, look what's happening. And I think it's insane that he was talking about how, look how Baldur was introduced and look at Thrud. Thrud isn't an enemy. Thrud is a light-hearted individual, which is part of the reason why they don't think she's ready to be a Valkyrie. Right? Sigurd is not happy that Loki's there. Neither is Heimdall. Thor wants to kill him, but honestly doesn't really care because he raised the piece of shit dad and he would let his son die either way. Like, there's a lot happening there. But they always want to smooth things over. He's in Asgard. He's going to want to smooth things over people who can immediately kill him. He didn't try to immediately smooth things over with his dad. Like, you see what I'm talking about? They weren't trying to smooth things over with his dad. And when they did try to do shit like that in the group setting with Tyr and Freya, all those people inside Sindri's house, it's because they want to get on the same page because they want to start a war. They do not have time for their bullshit. We're trying to start a war with the Aesir. That's a bigger issue. Like, holy shit, man. Like, it's just like... Oh, here's a comment. Here's a comment. Look at this. You seem to be completely ignoring the scale, impact, and weight behind all this stuff. The difference in writing between 2018 and Ragnarok is noticeable, yes, but that's a good thing. 2018 was a story with one clear goal the entire way through, no matter what happened between start and end, the goal remained the same. Spread the ashes. Ragnarok does not follow this metric. At first, Kratos' goal is to train Atreus because he believes he's going to die. And Atreus' goal is to find Tyr to get him to fight Odin. Two entirely different goals, and within an hour or two, these goals change entirely. Kratos isn't even on board with fighting Odin until the last few hours of the game. The entire first half of the game is intense, showing infighting, lack of trust, bonds slowly being pulled apart by prophecy, and then when Atreus goes to Asgard, or the Iron was Asgard, the pattern is broken. Atreus' moments are supposed to be breaks in the tension, which is exactly why Atreus goes there at all. He's angry with his father and needs to go and be on his own for a bit. The humor element in Asgard does two things. Slows down the tension within the story, allowing moments for a pause, a change of pacing, giving the audience a moment to catch up and ground themselves in both where the plot and where the plot is heading. And introducing characters we heard about in 2018. Serves as a contrast to what we already know in 2018. We hear all kinds of stories about Mimir, about Asgard. Exactly, I was going to get on this point too. How the Mimir and the Aesir are fucking awful, terrible people, and then you go to Asgard and people are happy and making jokes and all this shit too. Atreus is young, hopeful man and wants to see the good in people. So we get to go to Asgard expecting harassment when we really get the fun side adventures, new characters specific to Atreus and his arc, and a sharp contrast in expectation. Locking an entire 20-hour story to being serious, heavy, deep thinking, filled with nothing but heavy topics is unrealistic. Unfun to play, unfun to watch, and also doesn't benefit the plot or any character arcs. The biggest part of Kratos' arc happens near the end of the game. Thumbs up here. Dialogue seems too modern. Listen to, like, this is the shit I'm talking about. This is the shit I'm talking about, though. Like, because they never, again, we've watched 2 of these videos. Well, 1.5. But at no point do they actually tell you what they want. They'll tell you, oh, bring these writers. But if you're saying that this is the system, then what do you want to be changed? Oh, Collins World did a video debunking him. Well, shit, I just wasted an hour of my life. But like, this is why I get so tired of these complaints, man. Because there's never any actual tangible solution. It's just, it sounds modern, but this is why it's modern. Dog, you're not playing God of War if it sounds like the fucking prose edda, okay? You're not. You're not doing that. You want to know why it sounds modern? Because you're the current audience. What? Lindsey Graham died?